One look from her changed the whole night, and I didn't understand why until much later, when I was already home and still standing in my shoes. It was supposed to be quick. I'd duck into the bookstore on my way back from a late shift, grab the novel my sister kept texting me about, and disappear. The place was half-lit, that end-of-day glow where the lights are dimmer than they should be, and the air smells faintly of paper and old coffee. A bell rang when I pushed the door open. I remember thinking how loud it sounded. She was behind the counter, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair pulled back like she'd done it without a mirror. Not styled, just decided. Mid-40s, maybe more, but there was nothing careful about her. She looked up, and that was the look, the one that landed and stayed. Not flirtatious, not curious, just present, like she'd been expecting me without knowing why. Evening, she said, then paused. We close in 15. I'm fast, I said too quickly. I always talk too fast when I'm nervous, like I'm trying to outrun the moment. She nodded, already turning back to a stack of returns, giving me the space to exist without watching. That alone felt like a kindness. The store was quiet in a way that made every small sound matter. Pages whispering, a chair shifting. Somewhere, a heater clicked on, then off. I pretended to browse. I wasn't looking for the book anymore. I was trying to calm my hands. She moved with a kind of certainty that didn't ask permission. When a book slipped from the pile, she caught it against her hip without breaking her sentence. She was on the phone now, voice low, practical, gently firm. I caught fragments. Tomorrow's fine. No, that's not how inventory works. A smile tugged at one corner of her mouth, then vanished. She listened more than she spoke. I found the book by accident. When I brought it up, she took it from me, fingers brushing mine. Nothing dramatic, barely there, but she didn't pull away right away. She glanced at the cover, then at me. You like this kind of thing? She asked. I like endings that don't explain themselves, I said, and immediately wished I'd said something normal. She looked at me again, really looked, like she was deciding whether I meant it. Huh, she said. Not impressed. Not dismissive. Just considering. She rang it up. The register froze. She sighed, the kind of sigh that comes from long familiarity with small frustrations. Of course. I'm not in a rush, I said, and meant more than the words. She glanced up, surprised, then softened, just a fraction. Most people say that and don't mean it, she said. She rebooted the system, shoulders tense, then relaxed when it cooperated. When the receipt printed, she tore it off and slid it toward me, then hesitated. You forgot your bag. Oh, I had. She stepped around the counter, closer now, and handed it to me. There was a beat where neither of us moved. The heater clicked again. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing on wet pavement. Careful, she said, nodding at the sky through the window. It's starting to rain. Thanks, I said. I stood there longer than necessary, like if I left too fast I'd miss something unnamed. She watched me this time, not smiling, not pushing me out. Just there. When I finally stepped outside, the rain had just begun, light, uncertain. I walked half a block before realizing I'd forgotten the receipt. I turned back, but the lights were already off. All night, that pause stayed with me. The way she looked at me like time had bent slightly in the middle. I keep wondering if she felt it too, or if that look was just something she gives everyone, and I'm the only one still standing in it. I didn't plan to go back the next day. I told myself that, out loud, even, like saying it would make it true. But the afternoon dragged, and by early evening I found myself standing across the street again, watching the lights inside the bookstore come on one by one. The bell rang when I entered. She looked up, paused, then nodded like she'd already placed me somewhere in her day. Back so soon, she said. Not a question. I think you kept my receipt, I said, holding up the book. It was a thin excuse. We both knew it. She checked the drawer anyway, moving slowly, like she was giving herself time. Register's acting up again, she said, almost to herself. She pressed a button, then another. Nothing. Her jaw tightened, just a little. If you're in a hurry, I'm not, I said, and this time she didn't look surprised. She stepped aside, gesturing to the counter like I belonged there. I leaned in, pointing at the screen, pretending I knew what I was doing. Mostly, I noticed her hands. long fingers, a faint ink smudge near her thumb. She kept rubbing it, like she hadn't realized it was there. We worked in quiet. She explained the problem in pieces, stopping mid-sentence, starting again somewhere else. I listened more than I spoke. Every now and then she laughed at herself, short, surprised laughs, like they escaped before she could stop them. Each time, she glanced at me afterward, checking for something. I never knew what to give back, so I just stayed. "You're very calm," she said finally. "Most people get annoyed." "Maybe I'm good at waiting," I said. She didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was softer. "I used to be," she said, then turned away too quickly, stacking a pile of books that didn't need stacking. The store felt smaller then. The heater hummed. Outside, the rain had settled into a steady rhythm. She rubbed her temples, exhaled, and leaned against the counter. For a second, the confidence slipped. I saw the tiredness she'd been hiding. Under her eyes, in the way her shoulders sank when she thought no one was looking. "Long day?" I asked. She nodded. "Long year," she said, then caught herself. "Sorry. That wasn't. It's fine," I said. "You don't have to finish it." She studied me, like she was deciding whether that was safe. "People usually want explanations," she said. "I don't," I said, and meant it in a way that surprised me. The register beeped to life. She straightened, relief crossing her face. "There," she said. "Looks like you fixed it." I barely touched it. "Still," she said. She tore off the receipt and handed it to me, our fingers brushing again. This time, neither of us pulled away right away. The moment stretched, quiet, fragile. Her hand trembled, just enough that I noticed. She looked up, met my eyes, then stepped back, breaking it. "It's late," she said gently. "Yeah," I said. I didn't move. Neither did she. And in that small, suspended space between us, I felt it, the pull of something we weren't naming, already asking what it would cost to stay. The storm rolled in without warning, the kind that doesn't ask if you're ready. I was already inside when the rain started, hard, sudden, loud against the front windows. She locked the door early, flipping the sign to closed even though it was barely past 8. "Looks like we're stuck," I said, trying to sound light. "Looks like it," she said, but she didn't smile. She checked the lock twice, then leaned her forehead briefly against the glass, watching the rain smear the street into something soft and unreadable. The power flickered, didn't go out, just enough to make the quiet feel intentional. She moved around the store, tidying shelves that were already neat, straightening corners that didn't need it. I offered to help. She hesitated, then nodded, handing me a stack of books. We worked side by side in the back aisle, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Almost. Every time I shifted, she adjusted too, like we were magnets refusing to decide which way to turn. I noticed how tired she looked tonight, not in a dramatic way, just the small signs. The way she stretched her neck slowly, the way her eyes closed for a second longer than necessary when she sighed. "Do you ever wish you'd chosen something else?" she asked suddenly, not looking at me. "Sometimes," I said. "Do you?" She laughed, but it was thin. "That's not a fair question," she said, then stopped. "Sorry. I shouldn't. It's okay," I said. I wanted to say more. I didn't. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, and something changed, her posture, her breath. She let it ring once, twice. Then she picked it up. "Not now," she said quietly. I said I needed space. A pause. "No, I'm not doing this again." She ended the call and set the phone face down, hands resting on it like it might move on its own. "I didn't mean to overhear," I said. She shook her head. "It's fine." Then, softer, "It's always the past calling at the worst times." We stood there, the storm filling the space between words. She leaned back against the counter, close enough now that I could smell her. Clean, something warm underneath. She looked at me, really looked, like she was about to say something that had been waiting too long. "You don't ask many questions," she said. "I don't want to make things harder," I said. Her mouth opened, then closed. She reached out without thinking, fingers brushing my wrist. It was brief, accidental, except it wasn't. She didn't pull away right away. The lights flickered again. Somewhere, a door banged in the wind. She inhaled sharply, then stepped back, folding her arms like she needed the distance. This isn't, she started, then stopped. I shouldn't. I nodded, even though every part of me leaned forward. I stayed where I was. She took a step toward me, then another, close enough now that the space between us felt fragile, charged. Her eyes dropped to my mouth, then lifted again. For a second, everything went quiet. She reached up, stopped just short of touching my face, and whispered my name like a question she wasn't ready to hear answered. We didn't talk for 2 days after that night. Not because we agreed to it, because neither of us knew how to step back into whatever we'd almost crossed. When I came in again, the bookstore felt different. Too clean, too quiet. Like a room after an argument where everything's been put back in place except the air. She was already there, sitting at the small table by the window with a mug that had gone untouched. Her hands were wrapped around it, but she wasn't drinking. You came, she said. Yeah, I said. I wasn't sure if I should. She nodded, like that answered something she hadn't asked. I wasn't sure either. We didn't move closer. We didn't joke. The space between us felt deliberate now, measured. Every sound landed heavier than it should have. A page turning. The heater clicking on. Outside, traffic passed, ordinary and cruel in how normal it all was. I've been thinking, she said finally, eyes still on the window. And I don't like the answers I keep coming to. I waited. I'd learned that rushing her only made her retreat. This, she said, gesturing vaguely between us. Whatever it is. It's not simple. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm not someone who gets to pretend anymore. Pretend what? I asked. That I don't know better, she said. Then she looked at me. Really looked, like she was bracing herself. That I don't see what's happening. I swallowed. What is happening? She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding it all day. I don't know, she said. And that's the problem. Silence stretched. Not awkward, loaded. The kind that presses against your chest. I noticed her fingers trembling slightly around the mug. She noticed me noticing and set it down, hands flattening on the table like she needed the grounding. You're not doing anything wrong, she said quickly. Too quickly. That's what scares me. I shook my head. I'm not asking for anything. I know, she said. And I keep waiting for you to. Because then I'd have an excuse. That landed harder than I expected. An excuse for what? For walking away, she said. Her voice dropped on the last word. I didn't step closer, even though every instinct told me to. Do you want to? She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet, not crying, just overwhelmed. I don't know how to stay without losing something I already spent years rebuilding. I nodded slowly. And I don't know how to pretend this is just nothing. Her breath caught at that. She looked at me like she wanted to say my name again, like before, but didn't. Instead, she leaned back, putting the table between us like a line she was afraid to cross. This isn't about romance, she said, almost to herself. It's about timing and damage, and the kind of choices that don't announce their consequences until it's too late. I stared at the floor, then back at her. So what do we do? She held my gaze for a long time, long enough that I felt exposed in a way I hadn't expected. Then she said, barely above a whisper, I think the worst part is that I finally feel seen, and I'm terrified of what it might cost you. I noticed it before she said anything. The way she kept glancing toward the back room like it had started breathing on its own. She was quieter than usual, movements slower, like she was carrying something fragile and hadn't decided where to set it down. Can I show you something? She asked. It wasn't an invitation. It was a test. She led me past the shelves, through the narrow hallway to the small storage room. The light buzzed when she switched it on. Boxes stacked too neatly. A chair pulled out and used. On the wall, taped slightly crooked, was a photograph. I stopped without meaning to. A younger version of her stood in the picture, hair longer, smile easier. Beside her was a man about my height, arms slung around her shoulders, forehead resting against hers like the world had narrowed to that exact moment. You don't have to. I started. I do, she said, cutting me off gently. I should have earlier. She took the photo down, held it between us. Her thumb traced the edge, not the faces. His name was Daniel, she said. He used to help here on weekends. Said it kept him grounded. I didn't ask what happened. I waited. He died, she said. Just like that. No ceremony. No warning. Heart attack. 3 years ago. No signs. No time. The room felt smaller. I swallowed. I'm sorry. She nodded. Eyes still on the photo. I stopped letting anyone stand where he stood. A pause. Until you. That hit harder than anything she'd said before. I opened my mouth, closed it again. My chest felt tight, like I'd stepped into a role without knowing the lines. You don't look like him, she said quickly, as if correcting a mistake I hadn't made. It's not that. It's the way you wait. The way you don't push. He was like that. I'm not him, I said quietly. I know, she said. Then, after a beat, that's what scares me. She set the photo back on the wall, but didn't straighten it. Her hands shook now, no longer hiding it. I thought I was done with this part of myself. Wanting, noticing, letting someone matter in small, dangerous ways. I leaned against the shelf, keeping my distance. I don't want to replace anyone. Her eyes snapped up, sharp with something like relief and pain mixed together. I don't want you to. Silence settled again, heavy but different now. Less charged. More honest. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, hesitated, then pressed play. A voicemail filled the room. Her voice, younger, laughing. A man's voice after, warm, teasing. I'll be late, but save me something. I like knowing you're there. She stopped it before it ended. I haven't listened to that in a year, she said. Until last night. I didn't know what to do with that, so I stayed still. She looked at me then. Really looked, like she was measuring the distance between who she'd been and who she was becoming. I don't think you came into my life by accident, she said softly. But I don't know what that means yet. She stepped closer, not touching, not crossing anything, but close enough that I felt the shift, deep and quiet, like the ground settling after a tremor. And for the first time, the question in the air wasn't if something would change. It was who would be brave enough to let it. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No fight, no sudden decision, just a slow, inevitable narrowing of the space between us, like the room itself had grown tired of pretending we were separate. She didn't avoid me anymore. That was the first change. When I came in, she looked up and didn't look away. When our hands brushed, she didn't apologize. We didn't talk about rules or labels or consequences. We talked about small things instead, how the heater always made that clicking sound, how the rain never seemed to stop lately, how the bookshops smelled different in the mornings. One night, we stayed late again. Not because of a storm this time, because neither of us suggested leaving. She sat on the floor behind the counter, back against the cabinet, shoes kicked off. I lowered myself beside her, careful not to crowd her. The lights were dim, one lamp left on like an afterthought. Outside, the street was quiet in a way that felt earned. I've been trying to name this, she said after a while. I didn't answer. I knew better than to interrupt. And every word feels too big, she continued. Or too late. She laughed softly, then stopped. I don't want to explain it away. I don't want to bury it either. I leaned my head back against the cabinet. We don't have to call it anything. She turned toward me. I could feel her looking, not weighing, not measuring, just seeing. You make it hard to hide, she said. I'm not trying to, I said. I know, she replied. That word, no, sat between us, solid and calm. She shifted slightly, close enough now that our knees touched. She didn't move away. Neither did I. My hand rested on the floor between us, fingers curled, useless and very aware. After a long moment, she placed her hand next to mine. Not on it. Just there. Close enough that the heat traveled. That's enough, she said quietly. Not stopping anything. Allowing it. I let my fingers uncurl. They brushed the side of her hand, barely. She inhaled sharply, then exhaled, slow and deliberate, like she'd chosen not to retreat. We sat like that for a long time. No kissing. No promises. Just the quiet acknowledgement that whatever this was, it had already happened. Not all at once, but piece by piece, choice by choice. She leaned her forehead against my shoulder. The weight of it surprised me, trusting, unguarded. I stayed still, afraid that moving would break something sacred and ordinary at the same time. I'm not scared right now, she murmured. Neither was I. When we finally stood, she didn't step away. She reached for my hand. Not urgently, not like a question. Just a simple gesture, like it had always belonged there. We didn't say goodbye when I left. We didn't need to. Outside, the night was cool and quiet. I walked home slowly, aware of the exact place her hand had been, the way the silence had changed shape around us. Some things don't arrive loudly. They settle. And once they do, you stop pretending you could ever go back to the way it was before. I'm telling this from a distance now, not far, but far enough to see the shape of it. Some nights, when the store is closed and the lights are low, we sit the same way we did back then. Not hiding, not rushing, just sharing the quiet like it's something we earned. If you'd asked me before what love looks like, I would have said something louder, something clearer. I didn't know it could be this restrained and still feel this full. What changed in me first was the waiting. I stopped confusing urgency with meaning. I learned that wanting someone doesn't give you the right to pull them toward you. Sometimes it's enough to stand still and let them decide whether to come closer. I didn't lose myself in that space. I found a steadier version of myself there. She changed too, though she'd never frame it that way. She still keeps parts of herself guarded. She still flinches at sudden noise, still pauses before saying what she really means. But she doesn't apologize for existing anymore. She doesn't fold herself smaller when someone looks at her too closely. She lets the moment stay when it arrives. We never made a big announcement about us. There was no line we crossed and declared irreversible. It was more like a shared agreement to stop pretending nothing was happening, to sit beside each other and allow the truth to be quiet and present. Love, I've learned, doesn't always ask for bravery and grand gestures. Sometimes it asks for patience, for restraint, for the courage to stay when leaving would be easier and safer and lonelier. There are still days when the past shows up uninvited. A memory, a name, a pause that lasts a little too long. We don't fight those moments. We let them pass through the room like weather. What matters is that neither of us stands alone in them anymore. If I trace it back, really trace it, everything changed with that first look, not because it promised something, but because it asked nothing. It was the beginning of being seen without being claimed, of connection without demand. And maybe that's what made it real. We didn't fall into love. We settled into it, carefully, honestly, without pretending it wouldn't leave marks. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?